Investigation. We are now going to get a presentation from the South African medical and dental practitioners. Is it gentlemen? Yes. Who is going to be talking? All right. Only one person will be talking. All right. Supporting. All right. So I need to take the oath, and perhaps you should all introduce yourselves, starting from there up here.
My name is Dan Tokwani. I'm a practicing general practitioner in the township of Samdela, Sasolburg.
Thank you.
I am Dr. Joe Mailani, the chairperson of South African Medical and Dental Practitioners Association.
Thank you. Mainane.
Mailani.
Mailani.
It appears there on there. Yes.
Okay, Mailani. All right. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Samson Shabangu. I'm a GP in Soweto, and I'm executive of SMDP.
Thank you, Dr. Shabangu.
I'm Dr. Ngcukaitobi. I'm a GP in the Far East Rand in Nigel. I'm also an executive for the SMDP.
Thank you, Dr. Munisi.
Dr. TSL Sizani, a practicing dentist in Mamelodi.
Sizani.
Sizani.
Sizani. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sizani. All right, so I would need to take the oath then of the person who will be talking, and that is presumably you, Dr. Munisi.
Yes, it will be me, but Chair, I would suggest that the other colleagues take the oath as well. Part of our presentation is that they will all at some stage contribute.
All right, let's do that. Shall we start here with Dr. Sizani? Will you then say after me, I and your names? Swear that the evidence that I shall give
the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing else but the truth.
and nothing else but the truth.
So raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. And then Dr. Munisi. So will you say after me, I and your name?
I, Nkateko David Munisi,
Hereby swear
hereby swear
that the evidence that I shall give
that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing else but the truth.
nothing else but the truth.
If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. Dr. Shabangu, will you say after me, I and your names?
I, Dr. Samson Shabangu,
Hereby swear
hereby swear
that the evidence that I shall give
that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth.
and nothing else but the truth.
So raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. Dr. Mailana, will you then also say after me, I and your names?
I, Dr. Joe Mailani,
Hereby swear
hereby swear
that the evidence that I shall give
that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing else but the truth.
but nothing else but the truth.
So raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. Doctor, is it Mr. or Dr. Tukwan? All right, sorry. Will you also, after me, I and your names?
I, Mambesa Daniel Tokwani,
Hereby swear
hereby swear
that the evidence that I shall give
that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing else but the truth.
nothing else but the truth.
If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. Dr. Munisi.
Thank you, Chair. As we begin, I'll just take you through the first page, which just outlines our presentation. We'll ask Dr. Mailani to do an introduction, and then I will take you through the body of our presentation. This will then be followed, just before we conclude, by evidence to be presented by Dr. Tukwane, who's one of the SMDP members affected by the application of Section 59. We also have in our presentation a presentation from Dr. Mutlante, which we would want to place on record. He was supposed to join us, but he runs a busy practice in Katlehong and the locum doctor that was supposed to relieve him was not feeling well this morning, so he's not able to be with us. If it is so allowed, we can give just a summarized version of his presentation. It is there in our pack for the record.
Thank you.
Dr. Mailani.
Thank you, Dr. Manisi. And I want to thank the CMS for affording us the opportunity to come and present verbally. We are the South African Medical and Dental Practitioners Association. Thank you. As evidenced by the delegates today, our association really as presented here, I will just 1 minute present that we are a national association of medical and dental colleagues, and we cover, or our members come from all the 9 provinces. We also have members in the academia, even in the government structures. And our members service mainly previously disadvantaged areas like townships, rural areas, and informal settlement. SMDP is a known brand in the medical and dental industry, in all other stakeholders. This is the declaration that we, the majority of our members, we are dispensing medicines officially. I will really stop here. As I said, the whole background information is contained in our presentation document.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add to that introduction and indicate that the formation of SMDP in 1989, that is when levies were starting to be were introduced by medical schemes. So as doctors servicing the disadvantaged population who literally could not afford the initial levies of about 4 cents that were introduced in 1989. That's really the genesis of this organization. The next big matter that the organization had to deal with was when general sales tax, this was before the advent of VAT, when general sales tax was introduced to medicines, SMDP was instrumental in challenging the introduction of general sales tax. We are also one of the founder organizations where SMDP, NAMDA, and MASA were amalgamated to form SAMA. But because of the uniqueness of the profile of the patients serviced by SMDP doctors, despite us actively participating within the SAMA structures, we felt it necessary to keep SMDP alive. To that extent, a number of the chairpersons, including Dr. Jose Litlape, comes from SMDP. Dr. Gwen Ramuhupa, just to mention some of the members who come from this organization. I will proceed to item 2, which is essentially the profile of SMDP members. Currently in our books, we have got about 1,663 members. Only 2 of those members are white. The rest are black, which includes African, Indian, and colored. These members practice mainly in previously disadvantaged areas, which includes townships, rural areas, and in the majority, we service black patients. As a result of this, the significant majority are dispensing practices, exactly because most of the townships do not have pharmaceutical services. The significance of raising the dispensing aspect will later be illustrated as an added risk where Section 59 is open to misapplication and eventual abuse of our practitioners. The demographics and profile of patients that we service, as already alluded to, they are in the majority black, and largely due to their socioeconomic status, these members are of the lower, usually of the lower options of the medical schemes with limited benefits generally, and usually tied up with one or other designated service provider. And we're of the view that that's part of where the root of the problem at hand. Out-of-pocket payment by the members that we service is a difficulty. They are largely dependent on the benefits afforded to them by the plan of the medical scheme that they would have subscribed for. As far as the allegations of racial discrimination by medical schemes, as SAMDP, we are unable to conclusively comment on the issue of racial profiling by medical schemes, since our membership profile is almost entirely black. Thus, the data exposure is almost exclusively related to the black healthcare professionals. Also taking into cognizance the fact that only 9.9% of blacks are members of medical aid, compared to about 72.9% of the white counterparts. But we wish to state on record that as SMDP, we are against any form of racial profiling. I will move on to cover some of the issues raised in relation to Section 59 by practitioners that we represent. 5.1.1 would be the first complaint, which relates to entrapments, where probes are sent to the practice to entice a doctor to commit a crime, like asking for medical certificate and asking for favors. We are of the view that this does tamper with the doctor-patient relationship. The next one relates to the withholding of payment. This practice does affect doctors. It affects the cash flow of the practice. It has even led to practitioners losing their practices, assets, and even some taking their lives due to the distress associated with payments being withheld. The third matter refers to payment of patients rather than the doctor. In instances where the scheme pays the patient instead of the doctor, this has led to the patients using the money for other matters and largely not paying for the services that have been rendered by the doctor. Most of them, we say, literally considers this a bonus as and when it happens. As we've already indicated, that the patients that we largely service literally live at the border of the economic status. We further quote the Chava judgment, which relates to Section 59, paragraph 2, where direct payment to doctors rather than paying off members, where the judge summed in his judgment in this manner, I quote, "When a member utilizes medical services and arranges for a provider to submit a claim to the scheme, they are authorizing the scheme to pay the doctor directly and not the member," close quote. The fourth complaint relates to the coercing of doctors to sign acknowledgement of debt. Doctors who are accused of fraud are frequently coerced to sign acknowledgement of debt to a medical scheme by withholding of payment or paying patients directly. This, as already indicated, this move affects his cash flow. This acknowledgement of debt, in essence, become a repayment plan of amounts allegedly defrauded from the medical aid. The amounts computed in this acknowledgement of debt, we contend, are largely thumbsuck. The doctor is intimidated by the process, is ill-equipped to represent himself, and to challenge or test the validity of the allegations in most of the cases, and is threatened by adverse publicity and being reported either to the regulator, the HPCSA, or SAPS, should he resist to signing the acknowledgement of debt. In the next item, we wish to raise some matters of contention. The first one is that medical schemes apply Section 59 of the Medical Schemes Act wrongly to their own benefit and to the disadvantage of doctors and their patients. Firstly, they leverage Section 59 to ensure that service providers sign the DSP arrangements with the medical scheme that they administer. Patients are then channeled to these DSPs. If a patient visits a non-DSP doctor, some schemes would either pay the patient directly or others would pay the doctor a lower fee. In other instances, patients are then forced to make a co-payment. Secondly, they leverage the Section 59 to conduct forensic investigations on service providers. Our submission is that our arguments raised in the above matter have specific reference to regulations 5 and 6 of Section 59 of the or Section 59 and the Medical Schemes Act, Act 131 of 1998. As far as Section 59, 1, read together with Regulation 5 of the Medical Schemes Act, which prescribes in detail how a service provider shall render an account to the medical scheme member and his medical aid. Section 59.2, read together with Regulation 6 of the Medical Schemes Act, prescribes in detail how a medical scheme shall pay any benefit owing to a supplier of service within 30 days after the day on which the claim in respect of such benefit was received by the scheme. Our submission is that Section 59 and Regulation 5 and 6 of the Medical Schemes Act affords a medical scheme and medical scheme members sufficient protection to ensure that an account rendered by the supplier of service is correct and acceptable for payment within a period of up to 90 days. This, we contend, should even be much more easier for those that are designated service providers who have been accredited and contracted by the Medical Schemes Administrator to provide such services. These accredited service providers, these practices are accredited pertaining to meeting the requirements, and such requirements would include the electronic submission of claims and adherence to the prescribed rules of those schemes. But then we now are going to cover how we feel, despite all of the protection that we've just covered as protection for the scheme and the scheme's member, there are misapplications. The first misapplication is where Section 59 prescribes in detail how accounts should be rendered, checked for correctness and acceptability, and paid for. The forensic units set their own requirements and can start questioning going back sometimes up to 4 years, where both the member and the medical scheme have, whereas these accounts were checked for before they were paid. We are of the view that going back 4 years, when the Medical Scheme Act dictates a maximum of 90 days, is totally unacceptable, and no basis exists for doing this, and is extremely detrimental and prejudicial to our members. The second misapplication is that the forensic units use desktop audits to collate statistical data that is extremely blunt and totally removed at times from clinical grounds or medical practice profiling, where at times there's not even a contact with the patient. And they further do not provide proof of any theft, fraud, negligence, or misconduct. The next misapplication is where the administrator would then take action without what we would have considered as a full investigation. And one of the initial applications is where payment is then withheld from the practitioner. And they then quote Section 59, Clause 3. Out of context, we contend, to give the impression that an injustice has been perpetrated by the practitioner. That misapplication is further compounded by the computation of the amount that is to be recouped, which we are of the view is largely arbitrary. the amounts recouped are never for the benefit of the patients. They are largely shared by the fraud units, forensic units, and the administrators. As SAMDP, we have participated in a number of the cases as a mediator on behalf or at the invitation of our members. Where we've been involved, SMDP would be invited by the members, and between 2004 and this year, we have accompanied plus minus 50 SMDP members to these hearings. The frequency would be between 2 and 3 of such hearings. But at this stage, I just need to say to the Commission that this is not reflective of the totality of the members of SMDP that have been invited. But most of the practitioners are solo practitioners who would largely, either by not wanting the embarrassment of such matters to be shared with colleagues, would then represent themselves. So the 2 or 3 practices that we represent a year, we are of the view does not cover the totality of practices that have had to go through the process. Where we've been invited by the practitioner, we would accompany the member and to the hearing, and the types of transgressions would differ between the GPs and the dentists. Examples of transaction or transgressions for the general practitioners would include, as detailed in 8.2, 1, claiming for ethical or originator medication, whereas generic medication have been dispensed. 2, over-servicing or even claiming for patients not seen. 3, practicing without the necessary permission to do RWAPs, remunerative work outside of the government work. For dentists, this would
Can you just explain how would the item 8.23 impact on the scheme?
Because part of the computation that gets presented by the scheme is that you, Dr. Mnisi, you are employed by government from 8 o'clock to 4 p.m. And to that extent, you are supposed to have not been at the practice, 1. But secondly, if you are to do any remunerative work, you need to have had permission from your employer, being the state. To answer your question directly, my view is that it would not necessarily impact on the scheme, the fact that your practice continues to operate. The person that can be aggrieved, or the entity that could be aggrieved, would be the taxpayer or the state if you then leave your place of work to go and do your private work. But other than that, it should not have any impact necessarily on the scheme.
I mean, how would this happen? So you submit a claim on the basis that you saw a patient between 3 and 4. And maybe you shouldn't have done it because you should have been in a state hospital. But the fact is that you were not, and you saw a patient and you're claiming for the payment. So what would the scheme do? I mean, they have to settle the claim because it's a valid claim. The mere fact that you committed misconduct in relation to your state employer, how would that actually apply in practice?
So essentially, it's one of the complaints that are presented. In fact, this matter, Chair, will be quite illustrated when Dr. Dan Tukwane presents, because he is, amongst the things that is accused of doing, is that he has seen patients without having the necessary RWAP. But we contend that whether you do have the RWAP or not, as far as the scheme is concerned, if the patient has been seen, ordinarily it should not have any impact. But the aggrieved party in that transgression would largely be the taxpayer, not the medical scheme. Examples of transgressions as far as dentists are concerned, the first one is inflation of invoices, particularly where the work or the preparation, for instance, of dentures was done by a dental lab, tooth extraction claimed for when not actually done. Once, now we go back to the process which we've been party to at those hearings. Once a medical aid or administrator has presented the details of the matter at hand, we would then, as SMDP, usually request that the administrator recuse themselves so that we can privately confer with the practitioner. And the discussions that we would have with a colleague are used to get more information from the colleague where applicable. And where applicable, we would have a peer-to-peer engagement with the practitioner. This might, but is not limited to, at times we have to highlight the errors which might have been committed by the colleague. We then also start preparing for a plea of leniency together and advised by the colleague. And where the colleague indicates to us that they have committed errors, and some of those errors include where they've dispensed generic medication and claimed for ethicals, which are usually much more expensive than the generic ones. We would then advise the colleague that we need to prepare an offer or be ready that the discussions would include talking about an offer to settle the matter. The process is then concluded by all parties discussing and at the end, if wrongdoing is found around the colleague, and a settlement has been arrived at, which the colleague would then sign the acknowledgement of debt and settle the matter. Where there are no transgressions by the colleague, there would be no such acknowledgement of debts signed. With all of the challenges and problems with Section 59, we wish to make proposals as SMDP on how some of the matters should be concluded, or how Section 59 can be amended to be accommodative and as a win-win for both the practitioners and the schemes. Noting, as per Section 59 and the Medical Aid Act, which dictates a 90-day as the period within which practitioners can submit and query patient accounts, we wish to propose that a similar period of 90 days should be applicable to medical aids for the finalization of any queried accounts. And this aspect, we wish that it could be regulated or even legislated, so that you do not then get surprises with matters being queried, sometimes going back 3 to 4 years. Secondly, we propose that standards relating to coding, claims process, and the treatment guidelines should be agreed upon to enable a mutually understandable audit process and gaps where disputed.
I don't know if you were here when we listened to the previous presentation, but Mr. Fenter told us that as far as coding is concerned, the summer guidelines on coding published in 2019 should be the reference point. What is your view on that?
We would very much be in favor of that as a point of departure. Because with the findings from the Competitions Commissioner, which ended the roundtable discussion of pricing and coding, that's part of where some of the matters or the problems emanated from. So we are fully supportive of such guidelines.
Is it also your experience that there is inconsistency in the coding by the schemes?
Completely. And, you know, Chair, same patient presenting to you with an abscess, a boil. For one scheme, the way in which you are supposed to charge for it is completely different from the other scheme. It does pose a very gray area and a very difficult area to be navigated by a solo practitioner. I'm sure it does pose similar challenges for even bigger practices. We further propose that no audit process should be completed without the engagement of patients and practitioners. To that extent, no punitive measures such as withholding of payments should be implemented until the process is completed and ratified, preferably by an independent panel.
Well, you see, the problem is that the schemes are saying, look, we suspect there is wrongdoing. We don't know fully whether there is or there isn't. Here is information. Please help us. Doctors, on the other hand, refuse to supply the information, citing doctor-patient confidentiality. And the schemes are saying the risk is too high to the rest of the members to continue allowing a doctor that potentially is fraudulent. And so in order to mitigate the risk, we don't terminate the relationship, but we pay the patient directly. The process you are now designing here is not going to be conducive to that risk mitigation strategy that the schemes are claiming.
Chair, that's why part of what we're suggesting is that the patients need to be involved, which immediately takes care of the confidentiality matters, because either a patient or a patient-nominated representative would be party to that process. We have also proposed that these matters need to be settled, ideally, within that 90-day period, not coming back 3 years later, which has got its own many challenges, as indicated by what we've presented.
What happens then if it has not been resolved in that 90-day period? Are you saying that the money that has been lost to the scheme should simply never be recovered?
If there's fraud, we, one, as SMDP, do not support any fraud.
Yeah.
Secondly, if there is fraud, we are of the view that the legal processes should take its course.
What should they do? They should issue a summons and go to court.
Absolutely.
That's even-
And also possibly report such colleagues, because fraud would not be within the prescripts of the ethical guidelines from the HPCSA. So to that extent, such a colleague should then be subject as well, if fraud is proved, to the prescripts of the HPCSA, the regulator.
I mean, that even poses a more greater risk to the members of the scheme. I mean, if each and every claim, as long as you don't identify it within that 90 days, in the context where 35,000 are processed every day, and every time you must go to court and try and recover whatever you can. I mean, that doesn't sound to me to be terribly practical.
Want to come in?
If I may come in, Chair, I think it goes to proper coding and agreed coding so that when a claim is adjudicated right up front, by the time it's paid, 90% of the work is done, that this is a proper claim and so on and so on. Should you pick up that there's something with wrong with the claim, surely it can't take 4 years for you to realize that there was some claim that was paid 4 years ago that is erroneous. Secondly, the issue of aggregating so-called claims in itself it's wrong, because basically it means that you agree that a little crime is fine. It's only when $1 million has been lost that you want to do something about it. I think somewhere along the line we lose the basic thing that we're dealing with treatment to a patient. And we are concentrating too much on the money side without saying that, has the patient been treated? Has it been treated properly? Now, if you come after 4 years and have not treated the patient properly, it actually means nothing for the patient at that time. And I think this is the underlying problem with third-party payment. Because on the one hand, you've got the clinical management of the patient. On the other hand, you've got financial management of the patient. And and then, of course, then you've got fraud units, which ex-policemen who got no interest in the patient at all. And if you're going to mine a lot of data and try to create something out of it, firstly, it doesn't help the patient at that time. Secondly, in terms of proper treatment of the patient, we're not using that in a proactive manner to say, how do we treat patients better? How do you make sure that the patient's rent goes far enough? I mean, for instance, the patient's, benefits might have run out in that particular year because of the alleged fraud. And he didn't get treatment or something happened to him. 3 years thereafter, that's of no use to the patient, whether you recover the money or not. And lastly, I'm sure, banking institutions handle far more bigger volumes of transactions. We should have robust systems enough that be able to adjudicate claims properly, not so much from a financial aspect only, but from whether the patient has had that treatment, has had proper treatment, and so on. After all, this is what the whole industry is premised on on payment for treating patients.
I mean, what's also unclear to me about this is that although they ask for this data, 3-year data, it's unclear what they do with it. Because in practice, the way they recover is simply by averaging on a particular proven set of claims. So it looks like this request for information is in any event unrelated to the recovery. So you just wonder then why is a doctor terrorized with a request for information which bears no relationship to the actual claim that the scheme is going to use anyway. Anyway, I was just testing the practicality of the suggestions you put in 9.3. I mean, the idea of going through an independent party each time to prove one claim, I mean, it doesn't sound to be too practical. But I get your point that if we have robust systems up front, that would minimize the necessity to recover after the fact.
Chair?
Yes. You decide.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to mention a point that you touched on earlier on in terms of the codes, and you referred to SAMA. And as a dentist, let me also say, for the dentists, we also rely on the codes from SADA. And that's point number one. But in terms of interpretation of these codes, there's sometimes from the medical aid side, coupled with that, what they would call protocol. And those protocols, by and large, sometimes are not consistent across the medical aid. They would like to call themselves industry. The other thing is the question of options. And as SMDP, most of our members are serving in areas where members of schemes would be of the lower options. And the lower your option, the more stringent are your protocols. And that is an inconsistency that we find very problematic. The last thing that I would like to mention, especially with dentists and dental practices, is the whole notion of authorization, wherein there's always an element sometimes of a lab fee, and it can be very expensive. You then get an authorization that says, on this day you can go on and do the procedure, only to be told later on that, you know what, the authorization that we give, in fact, is a rider that says the authorization cannot be regarded as making sure or meaning that for sure your payment will be done or you'll be paid for what you've done. So that, from the practitioner's point of view, is always a problem.
May I just pick up on your submissions in relation to the coding for dentists? So we also heard earlier and previously that the allied health professionals don't obviously have codes which are published by SAMA because it's a different set of professionals. So my understanding also that SADA publishes dental codes, and you wouldn't have any resort to the codes in the SAMA manual. Dentists don't have any resort to codes in the SAMA manual. I'm just getting you to confirm that.
Not SAMA, it's SADA.
Yes, correct. I think I understand you have to resort to the SADA manual.
Yes, as a dentist.
Now, is there 2019 SADA manual?
2019, I think the last time it was, I'm not sure, it's not revised every year, but they would rely on the latest version.
And is there, in terms of your membership, is there anyone else who falls, let's say, outside the SAMA bucket? So you've got dentists who fall outside of it, allied health professionals fall outside it. Is there any other professional that we haven't heard from who?
I think the question was whether the SADA manual has any relationship to the SAMA manual.
Let me explain that one, because SAMA would be for mainly medical codes, and SADA would be for dental codes. But there's a speciality that sort of crosses over to the medical codes, which is the maxillofacial and oral surgeons, because some of their codes are not covered under SADA. They then rely on specific, like they mostly, as you would imagine, deal with head and neck, and they would then rely on maybe ENT codes that would be found within the medical from SAMA.
Thank you. You wanted to add something that
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I'm just coming back to the 90 days dispute. The 3 months is sufficient, really. And when you are presenting, I couldn't just imagine in my head why could the problem, exceed that and going wherever? Because in most of the cases, I represent the association, and as he has presented, we just go there. The forensic investigator presents and our member presents. We are sitting on the fence, very, very, very neutral. And after the presentation, it will be clear whether, the practitioner has wronged the scheme or not. Then after the presentation, that is where the scheme will go out, and then we get the truth, and then we settle the problem. So it can't exist. That 3 months, it's sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. We further propose that any panel dealing with, investigating panel dealing with the medical fraternity should not only comprise of legal counsel, but should be enriched by the presence of healthcare practitioners and civil society representatives of patients. SMDP further recommends that all users should have a unique patient identifier and common health information system, or a system that is able to aggregate the medical data so that it can then be easily accessible to the providers. Because one of the areas which the SMDP members or any practitioner that finds themselves being holding for an inquiry is the lack of data. The repositories of data are essentially the schemes, and the data that they have, usually they are not at liberty to share with you. Data that would cover how they have arrived at the amounts that you are said or you are requested to repay. We also recommend that the funds that are recouped in the majority should be placed back in the pool of medical benefits for the patients, and that this particular matter should be regulated by law. At this point, Chair, we'll pause and request that we move on to a presentation by Dr. Dan Tokwane, who, as we have indicated, is an affected doctor. His presentation is on the last part of the pack. Once he has detailed his matter, and we felt it will put a good perspective to the matters that we've tabled, to have an affected doctor being with us. Once he's gone through his presentation, I will give a very summarized presentation from the matter relating to Dr. Soli Mutlandi. Dr. Tukwan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
As earlier said, my name is Dan Tokwani. I'm practicing in the township of Zamdela in the Free State, and I've been practicing there since 2003. On the 24th of May this year, I received a correspondence from MedScheme. The title of that correspondence was Verification of Claim Details. In that correspondence, MedScheme alleged that I am state employed. As I said, the last time I was employed by the government was in 2002. So in 2003, I had been working independently as a practitioner, duly so under the law. So MedScheme put it to me that, as a matter of fact, I'm employed by the state. Secondly, that the claims that are submitted through my practice were higher for members living in a province other than where I'm practicing.
I'm trying to find this letter that you received, because we have the letter of the 7th of June.
Yes.
And the
24th. Yes, Annex
8,
I'll have
4 pages from the back of it. Our sincere,
yes, I've got it.
yeah, our sincere apologies that
No,
that last part is not numbered.
Yes, well, I mean, nothing is numbered here, but this is fine. We've got it. Annex 8, document 4.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That the claims that are submitted through my practice were higher for clients living in a province other than where I work. They were asserting that I'm working somewhere else and not in the Free State, whereas I'm working somewhere else. The clients that I'm seeing are predominantly coming from Free State, which is not true. They also said that I have a high volume of claims submitted for Sunday, and therefore requested that as a result of this, I must give them records of a number of my patients for the period May 2017 to 2019. That I should also provide them with the permission, the proof of permission by the government to do work outside of state employment. And that the third thing I must submit was the tax invoices of medicines that I'd dispensed for a period that was not specified. MedScheme further on said that they could do this because they were empowered by the law, to do so. They quoted...
Is this letter only one page? Because we only have one page here.
One page.
Well, we have the first page.
And it goes up to page 5, yeah?
MedScheme.
Oh, yes, okay. I think this is probably it. Yes, I think this is where it is. All right, carry on, we found it.
And therefore, the law that they quoted was Regulation 15.2c of the Medical Schemes Act, that it actually empowered them to access records of patients who were in a managed healthcare kind of arrangement. And they were quoting that as the basis for which they wanted records of patients that stipulated. I wrote back, okay, the second document that, the second letter that I received from them was the letter that was sent on the 7th of June.
Yes.
The letter of the 7th of June pretty much repeated what was suggested earlier on, that I'm state employed, that I'm seeing more patients from a different province from where I'm practicing, that I have a large volume of patients seen on Sundays, and therefore I needed to provide, list of records of patients that I've seen for the period 2017 to 2019, invoices, for an undisclosed period, as well as proof of permission. But this one came also with that over this period, I've literally defrauded Med Scheme a sum of almost 3.5 million, that I also needed to make arrangements to pay, They've given me 3 options on how to pay that. I wrote them to find out what they were basing their allegations on. They sent me a piece of paper that's written employment gov, which is not headed, which is not titled, which is not official. It's part of the package.
So, Dr. Kone, in the letter, in the table that amounts to about 3.5 million, on the left-hand side, are those the schemes, those abbreviations? Those
are the schemes that they say I'd seen members who are living in a different province for the period that they wanted proof that these clients were seen. And they were solely basing it on the fact that, according to them, I'm practicing elsewhere, and therefore my practicing elsewhere constitute fraud. So those are the schemes.
And just to clarify that, the amount of 3.475 million, did you know at the time how that was calculated?
There was no explanation how that figure was arrived at. They simply said that for a period of 3 years, I've seen clients outside of my area of practice, even though it was not true. I mean, I'm working where the clients are, They decided to put me somewhere else, And therefore, by being somewhere else where they knew, I owed them 3.5 million rands. So I wrote Med Scheme to request that they give me the basis for their allegations, And they gave me an email with an untitled document. It's an extra. It is Annexure D. That document extends to the back page of that Annexure D. It clearly says that I'm currently employed by a government. That my postal address, as appearing here, which in actual fact is my residential address. They said that was my postal address. My residential address is where I'm practicing, actually. They took my practice address and put it as a residential address. And the practice address, they could not provide me.
But isn't the residential address and the postal address in different provinces?
I stay in Joburg South, but I practice in Sasolburg. And this address can never be confused because on a yearly basis, from as far back as when I started practicing. We register with the council, we register with the Board of Health Funders, we register with the Department of Health. The information that they are misquoting, it's information that if they're checked with those institutions, they will find it to have been the same historically. So they took that information, which is available with those institutions, and messed it around. Decided to put me as staying in my practice when that property is registered as a business property, you know. It is registered with the deeds office as a business property. They say I'm
Are
staying
you
there.
saying the only thing that is incorrect in this, on this, this table is that the residential address and postal address is swapped around?
They not only swapped those around, they also say that I'm employed with government, which is not so. My postal address is not this one. This is my residential address. I don't post from my house. I have a postal address, which is not here, and they have it. They ignored the postal address. They put my house as a postal address, and they took my practice address and said that is my residential address. And on the basis of that, they concluded that I'm seeing patients that I'm not supposed to be seeing, and I owe them 3.5 million rents.
I think they suspended you at the time, the July or the June letter.
Yeah, they suspended my payments. They withheld. In fact, they started taking money for claims that I've been sending, you know. They have been taking.
They suspended you on the 24th of May.
In May, they wrote the initial letter. In June, that's when they started suspending my payments.
Yes, the 7th of June.
Yes. They started
That's the
suspending
one where they say that anyway, your point is that prior to the conclusion of the investigation, you were put on direct payment.
Then there was no indirect payment. They simply stopped paying me.
Because it says here in the 7th of June letter, please note that during the period of recovery, your practice shall not be entitled to recover any payments from any members of the aforementioned scheme.
Yes.
So this is a blacklisting.
They literally blacklisted me.
Yeah.
So did they put you on suspension first and then they blacklisted you?
They, firstly, they,
Can you look at the 24 May letter, please? The second page.
okay, let me just, I'm using a different document.
Do you see it?
A minute. Let me see it from here.
It's the Annex A, document 4. That's what we were looking for earlier.
Yes.
And go to
Yes.
the second page,
Yes.
at the third paragraph from the bottom.
Oops, I think I've mixed them up. The 24th May, I think it went, keep seeing it. Yeah, but the bottom part, that's what she's looking. What is it? Doesn't extend here. It's not complete here. The one that you have here, I'm looking for the end of that.
You're looking for the? The 24 May, the one that was marked Annex A document 4, the one that you had initially referred us to.
Yeah, but it's not complete here. There's a second part to it.
Yeah.
You know. Yes, that's what you want. You want the second part to it.
No, I've got it, because I found it in another part of the pack.
Yes.
So I think it's earlier on in the pack.
Yeah.
It was found after Annex B.
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
This is what? This is Annex. This is Annex.
Yes, yeah, that's the one. Yes, that's the one.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, that is the one.
Okay, so can you see the third paragraph from the bottom?
Where they are saying that the above mentioned schemes are entitled. Is that the one that you
No, I don't know what we're looking at now. I'm looking at the second page of the 24th of May letter,
Yes.
where it says, please be further advised that due to the provisional findings, payments to your practice has been suspended until finalization
Yeah,
of
that-
this audit. It
that-
is our intention to finalize our audit within 30 days or less, subject, however, to your full and timely cooperation.
This was the later one. This is the June letter.
No, it's
No.
not the June letter. The 7th of June letter. That's the one we looked at earlier,
Yes.
where they
The-
blacklisted you.
Yeah,
Yes.
the
You're
7th
being
of
referred
June.
to the earlier letter now.
The 7th of June letter. That's where they were saying that they want to verify.
I'm
No,
not
no,
asking
you're
you about
being
7
referred to
June.
the 24th of May letter. That's the two documents that have been given to you now.
Yes, yes. Where they say, please be advised that due to the provisional findings, payments to your practice has been suspended until finalized.
That's right.
Yes, yes, yes.
So on the 24th of May, they say payments to your practice have been suspended. So I interpret that to mean you were put on indirect payment. And
The-
that within, and that this would last for 30 days, because it was the intention, they say, to finalize the audit within 30 days with your cooperation.
Yeah.
So is that correct? You were put on indirect payment
No,
on
there was no indirect payment. They actually stopped paying me completely.
from 24 May?
Yes, the time that they actually started paying me indirectly was after I had complained. After I had complained, I've written letters to them, and quoting the Council on Medical Schemes decisions on relevant cases that are similar to mine and the law. They then decided to say that they're going to pay me indirectly, which they also still never did.
Okay, but
Uh,
according to this letter, they say that you are on indirect payment, but then not even 2 weeks later, they say you're basically blacklisted.
Yeah. What happened is that they wrote to say that they want to verify. And then later on, they wrote to say that I'm owing them 3.5 million, thereabout, and that they will not be paying my claims anymore, which they did. They never paid. I continue to see patients, continue to dispense medicine, continue to submit my claims, and they never honored them. That's what had happened. So from the second letter, which has a figure, that's when they stopped paying completely. Now, I wrote to request them to provide me with basis of their allegations. And this is the document, the small page that they sent
Yeah,
through.
it looks like what happened is that on the 31st of July,
Yes,
they wrote to you again,
yes,
where they said, due to us not presumably being able to validate the services you claimed to
Yes.
have rendered, the schemes have loaded a recovery and offset from your current claims. And then they say, we stopped the recovery at around 270,000 rands and allowed future claims to pay members until the audit is completed.
Yes.
So it looks like on the sequence that what they did is that in May they told you we're going to put you on direct payment. In June they actually blacklisted you.
yes,
In July they put you back on
Indirect.
indirect payment.
yes.
Yes.
That's the sequence.
they resumed payment, indirect payment,
Indirect payment.
and they recovered 270,000.
They held that 270,000 after I had complained and requested them to give me reasons for claiming that I was owing them 3.5 million rands. They did not come back to explain themselves. They wrote to say that they have taken a decision to rescind my suspension, that they are going to pay me, but they're going to pay me indirectly. The 3.5 million had been kept at 270,000 that they had taken from. In fact, that was by the way.
But Bob, where does the 270,000 come from? How did they come to that figure that they withheld?
From June, they started taking my money. They stopped paying me, and all the money that they'd taken from June had amounted to 270,000 rand by the time they wrote that letter on the 31st. And in fact, that letter was by the way, because they wrote earlier to say that they would be suspending their decision not to pay me. And when...
That's the one on the 18th of July.
Yeah.
So I would like, in the meantime, to inform you, Doctor, that the suspension of your account will be lifted.
Yes.
However, we will allow future claims to members until the audit is completed.
Yes.
All right, I mean, we get the sequence of how this happened. The
Yes.
first threat to suspend, and then a blacklisting, and then back to reinstate you, etc.
Yes.
So let's get to the substantive complaints that you have. I mean, the one is that they incorrectly understood your address to be Johannesburg, when in fact it was Sasolburg, and they confused them with the residential versus the business address. No, we get that.
The crux of the issue here is that audits that are done in a manner that is not structured. They have no basis. It's an audit that comes as a result of allegations that are baseless. It is easy to prove whether somebody is working for the state or not. All of us who work for the state until then have a personal number that is linked to your ID. You walk to any government department, they will tell you the activity of that personal number until a certain period. Secondly, it's also easy to find out whether somebody is practicing from a different address. When we, for example, register for dispensing, a special certificate gets issued with a specified address. I can't use that to dispense medicine elsewhere. It must be on the premises where it is issued, because they come and make sure that the premises comply, you know. So these allegations that, upon which, you know, further allegations are made of owing money, it's a basis that I think should be hammered out as to how do medical aids get it wrong? How does one trust a process that is based on lies in the first place? How does one give documents with the hope that they will be interpreted correctly if what medical aids have is deliberately warped up? So the issue that I think we have with the medical aids, with MedScheme in particular, is that whereas we may not mind, you know, to have audits running because we are a regulated industry, those must be based on a set of values that are known, you know. If you keep money on the basis of lies, you are not improving service. You destroy lives. But what is worse is that even after it was said that there will be indirect payments, I sit here with an affidavit of a patient who had been told on more than 3 occasions that the money had gone into their account and no such money could be found. And that patient made me an affidavit yesterday, you know, to say that your money is said to have gone into my account. I've gone to my account many times. There's no such money, you know. So the indirect payment also affects clients, you know, in a very negative way. So in as much as there's an argument that audits ought to be done, they ought to be done in a proper way, in a way that inspires confidence, you know, that doctors are not being victimized here. And I have strong suspicion that the manner in which these audits are being done is primarily the reason why the focus of medical aid is where it is, in townships where they know that people might actually not have the capacity, to go through the law or even afford a legal representation. So there is reason why, we have today a commission that is finding out whether there is a bias, in how audits are being done. They are done primarily because there's no truth, in how they are conducted.
Can you just tell us one thing? I'm not sure if I understand in this narrative. The 270,000 that had been withheld on the 18th of July when they decided to place you back, but on indirect payment, have you been repaid that money, or is it still with MedScheme?
Still with MedScheme.
All right. Now, then the amount that they calculated, that 3.5 million rands, what is the connection between that amount and the allegations? As I understand, the allegations against you are that you claim to be employed by the state. You claim not to work for the state, but in fact you are employed by the state. The second one is the confusion around your business versus residential address.
Yes.
And there was no complaint specifically that the claims themselves are either fraudulent or incorrect codes or excessive time.
No, there's nothing like that.
And so the amount of repayment of 3.5 million rands, was that ever made clear to you what the basis is for the...
No. Never. I wrote to request that be made. It was never. In fact, that's when they decided that they will suspend my blacklisting, after I threatened to them to say that, what is the basis of your 3.5 million,
And now, I know the recovery stopped, because they were deducting the money directly. And now, what's the status? As far as they're concerned, you owe them money. As far as you're concerned, there's a stalemate. You don't owe them anything.
There cannot be any possibility of me owing them the money unless there was process to determine if, firstly, there's money owed, secondly, how much of that money is owed. You can't, in this country, suggest that somebody owes you money because you suspect that they're working for the state, that they're owing money because you suspect that they're practicing at a different address to what you know. It can't be.
Is the 19th of July the last time they wrote to you?
And they wrote, I think...
or is there anything that might be missing? Oh, yeah. 31st.
31st, I think there was...
Sorry, 31st was the last.
Yeah, 31st was. Yes, 31st was.
So they are waiting for that information, and then they will reimburse you the amounts.
They are waiting for information on my tax invoices for medicines that I purchased, without saying what period and what legal basis they have. Secondly, they are waiting for information on patients, which I said to them that I could only provide them with those patient files upon each and every one of those patients giving me permission to do so.
That's the thing I was trying to understand, is that they are complaining about an address, and they are also complaining about you being employed by the state.
Yes.
So why are they asking for information about patients?
Does that have to do with the allegation around seeing patients on Sunday?
It had nothing to do with that. All they are saying is that I'm seeing more patients on Sunday than on other days of the week.
We're just trying to understand why they're requesting your patient files, and it's just not clear to us.
It is not clear. It is not clear because what they are saying is that I work for myself, I work for the state, I'm working at a different address, and that I'm seeing more patients on Sunday. Therefore, they want the file. So it's not clear how you link the allegations with the patient files.
All right. Anyway, as you say, the last time they wrote to you was on the 31st of July.
Yes.
And that MedScheme might be better placed to explain why they asked for patient files.
Yes.
and that from your perspective, they're not relevant to the complaints.
Definitely.
Anything else?
And they also haven't told you why they're requesting your invoices for medicines that you purchased?
They stipulated a number of medical formularies and said that they want invoices without saying why.
Do you have anything else to add?
No.
Thank you. All right, so we've got this slight issue because you've given us the statement by Dr. Solemo Tlante. So I don't know what you want to do with that statement, which is it's actually not a statement by him, it's just an extract of a statement from him, which is included in your submission.
Yes, Chair, as indicated at the beginning, Dr. Solemo Tlante was supposed to have been with us. But due to circumstances beyond his control, he was not able to join us. So we would like to submit it as part of our submission to the Commission. But then, at your advice, Chair, whether should he have it as a sworn affidavit or is it acceptable as is? He does have a matter which is details. It's a matter between himself and Discovery Health. He has complained to CMS, did not get any help. He then went through to complain to the Minister of Health and currently is in the process because he has not have the matter resolved and is suspended from direct payment by Discovery Health, and to that extent he is now seeking legal assistance on the matter.
Look, the problem is that it's not even a statement, it's not even signed by him, let alone the fact that he has not deposed to it in an affidavit form. It's extracts from something else he wrote, which is then inserted into your statement. So, I mean, we need him at the very least to give us a sworn statement or a signed statement.
Okay.
We
will arrange that and forward it to the Secretariat.
It's a hearsay now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If you want to just tell us briefly about his case, you can do that, but we need the actual evidence from him.
Okay. We will forward that to the Commission. The summary of the matter is that Dr. Motlanthe, on the 17th of October 2018, he received a letter from Mr. Roots at Discovery Health. The letter demanded that he hand over pharmaceutical invoices for the past 3 years for the purpose of validating certain claims. He then, on the 18th, called the writer to find out whether were there any unethical or fraudulent activities from his side. He was then assured that there's no unethical or fraudulent activity detected against his practice. This was just a routine audit done to all practices. The letter demanded a summary or copies of certain medicine invoices for the past 3 years. He does run a busy practice in Kagiso, which sees between 40 and 50 patients a day. He then got the services of someone to help him to compile those invoices. He indicated to them that 14 days was too short because of the volume of invoices that were needed. He requested at least 3 months to prepare those invoices. He then did compile invoices. He says, I went through over 10,000 invoices and made up about 8,000 copies for them of invoices. But the impasse then happens when, once he had prepared the files or the copies of those invoices, he then indicated to Discovery that he's done the 8,000 copies, and the cost of him indicated what it had cost him to prepare those invoices and requested them to pay for that information before he submits the information. Then Discovery refused to pay for the invoices, and they gave him 7 days within which, if he has not submitted that information to them, they would then stop direct payment to him. In fact, he says to date they have withheld about 200. No, they withheld the 25,000 due to my practice, and he then complained, indicating that it is proper that they pay for the copies that he had made for them. Then, when they stopped direct payment to his practice, he proceeded to complain to CMS. The CMS made Discovery Health aware of the complaint. Discovery wrote back to CMS and told them that I am talking nonsense. I'm quoting from the letter. But he then had a meeting with Dr. Kabane at CMS, who
We have read that
yeah,
letter. I mean,
yes.
we know that
So
the
essentially,
problem was that
after having gone through all of these processes, the current status is that his matter, he remains suspended by Discovery from direct payment, and his practice opens until about 9 at night, and it is having a negative impact on the patients who pay him for the service and then claim from Discovery. But we will request him for a sworn affidavit, which will be or a signed letter.
And the underlying documents, the correspondence.
In the
that he has had
correspondence
with
that relates to this matter.
with
We
Discovery.
also, Chair, wish to state and further apologize for the documents relating to Dr. Dan Tokwane's matter. We will also forward properly numbered documents just for the record.
No, if the documents are complete, we will get our secretariat to help us with the numbering.
Okay.
We don't want to place further burdens on you, unless there are outstanding documents you want to send through.
Okay. And in conclusion, or as we conclude, Chair, we contend that healthcare providers generate data that is used by medical schemes against them without the providers having access to the same data and how they are profiled. In addition, our members are largely solo practitioners who use different service providers to submit their claims. This is part of the reason why SMDP does not necessarily have any aggregated data and would not be able to say whether there is a difference in the way the different race groups are treated. As far as data...
Well, I mean, the evidence of Dr. Motlanthe is that he inquired from his white colleagues who told him that they were not experiencing the same treatment from Discovery.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, what's your experience on that?
Yeah, as indicated right at the beginning, as far as SMDP members, the two white doctors that are members of SMDP have not had any problems, but we are of the view that that data is so limited. Our members are black. We do not have data which would say, or on the basis on which we can say that there is racial discrimination as far as the adjudication of claims is concerned. We further wish, as we conclude, wish to say that it's important that as data is captured, that the racial demographics of the patients should be indicated. Our view is that this would help from the public health perspective. It is important to understand the disease patterns, the frequencies of occurrences, and together with the best treatment options as per racial group. So to that extent, we are of the view that it is necessary for schemes to aggregate data and have one of the parameters, the racial profile of the race of the member. The SMDP cannot conclusively state that racial profiling is used by schemes and administrators, given the background.
Aren't there two types of data? The one data you're talking about is the data of patients.
Yes.
We have not focused on that, or whether or not there is available data, whether schemes have it. What the schemes say is the data they don't have is the data of practitioners, because they don't register them. They only register them by practice number. So, I mean, is that the data you say should be available? And if so, what is the purpose of keeping that data?
Just noting the demographics of the different populations that we treat, we have said our practitioners treat largely black patients, low economic status. It would be valuable information if aggregated, even for the benefits of researchers and pharmaceutical companies, as to one, these practitioners who are black, treating black patients, what type of medications are they using? What profile of illnesses, ailments are they treating? Just for the broad health care of the nation, I think that data would be valuable. Lastly, SMDP agrees that Section 59 has loopholes that can be exploited by schemes and administrators. We stand firm in stating our position against racial profiling and the misuse of Section 59 against service providers. Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether my colleagues would like to say any closing remarks.
Thank you. Well then, in that event, it remains of me to thank the South African medical and dental practitioners, to thank Dr. Mailane, the chair, and his team for coming, and also for the research that you prepared and that you presented with us. We will obviously be writing correspondence to you, asking for further documentation. What we obviously need immediately is just the sworn affidavits of the member that we can take into consideration. So the matter then is, the hearing is postponed to Friday, commencing at 10 a.m. On Friday, we will be having, among others, Mr. Vemtrang of SC, who will be giving us a legal interpretation of what racial profiling means. Thank you.